Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has taken actions to ease tax burdens by signing 4 executive orders. The 5% excise tax on telecom services was also suspended. The president also signed 3 other executive orders reversing the laws hastily signed by former President Muhammadu Buhari towards the end of his administration. While briefing journalists at the State House, presidential spokesman Deji Alake said the amendments were in line with the president's commitment to reviewing complaints about multiple taxation, local and anti-business inhibitions. So this morning, let's take a listen to the special advisor to the president on special duties, communication and strategy, Deji Alake, as he lists all the new laws.
In his inaugural speech, His Excellency President Bola Tinubu promised to address business unfriendly fiscal policy measures and multiplicity of taxes. Consequently, President Bola Tinubu, in fidelity to the pledge to put Nigerians at the center of government policies, has signed the following executive orders. Executive Order 1, the Finance Act, Effective Date Variation Order 2023, has now deferred the commencement date of the changes contained in the Act from May 28, 2023 to September 1, 2023. This is to ensure adherence to the 90 days minimum advance notice for tax changes as contained in the 2017 National Tax Policy. Executive Order 2, the Customs Excise Tariff Variation Amendment Order 2023. This has also shifted the commencement date of the tax changes from March 27, 2023 to August 1, 2023, and also in line with the National Tax Policy. Order 3. The President has given an order suspending the 5% tax on telecommunication services as well as the excise duties escalation on locally manufactured goods. 4. Further to his commitment to creating a business-friendly environment, the President has ordered the suspension of the newly introduced green tax by way of excise tax on single-use plastics, including plastic containers and bottles. In addition, the President has ordered the suspension of import tax adjustment levy on certain categories.
And that is a special advisor to the president talking there, Deji Alake. So this morning, joining me for this conversation is Gospel Obele, Chief Economist, Streetnomics. And he's actually joining us from London, UK. Thank you so much for joining us, Gospel.
Thank you for having me, Lekan. Good morning.
All right, so you just listened to the special advisor talking there. What are your thoughts on the signing of the 4 executive orders, and how do you think that will even impact businesses, the country's GDP, and the overall economy?
Yes, I mean, first of all, safe to say that Nigeria has a lot of fiscal crisis currently ongoing. Top of the list is, revenue mobilization and all that. So you could understand the late efforts and all of the initial executive orders that were signed in, just to rake in more revenues by increasing excise duties and the likes, and telecoms and duties and the likes. And but then we've also seen in the last 1 year, all the rollouts of these policies, including the list of policies that has been, recently introduced by the current president, Bola Tinubu, has been a bit very much more incoherent and inconsistent, and it's also borders heavily on the current cost of living or the current cost of doing business crisis we have right now. So the attempt to sort of withdraw these executive orders were such as to position as though the government is seeking to create some form of tax relief, or some form of relaxing of initial policies that were geared towards quote unquote revenue mobilization. So it's just within the times we're in, how current events, inflation and all the likes have impacted deeply on doing business and just creating some sense of relief, and all of that. But then again, I'm pretty sure that these issues will be revisited much later. But it's still a good move just to be able to also restore confidence in the system. Again, being the way things are going right now in context to the rising cost of living and doing business.
So, Gospel, if you say that the policies rolled out by this administration has been inconsistent and incoherent, does it have to do with the policies per se, or the timing of those policies, or how they're being implemented? Because there's been some allusion that these latest moves by the government is in a way in tandem with what the president has said earlier, which is about letting the poor breathe. So does it have to do with having to come up with this kind of cushioning to mitigate the impact of the other policies, or you would say that it would not have any effect on the common man and households?
Yeah, I mean, first off, when I mean inconsistent and constantly incoherent, I mean that one policy does not really enable the functionality of the other. You know, just such clash of policies or not. So, take for instance, you have the Naira unification, for subsidy, and you know, attempt to raise electricity bills and all that. All of those things coming in a space of almost 3 weeks or to a month. You know, that's to tell you that you're not in quote unquote letting the poor, the average Nigerian breathe. All right. So yeah, does this policy help to cushion that? The attempt is to ensure that it does cushion that, but it may not necessarily do that. And it has nothing to do with this administration, but it has everything to do with the pile up of the policies in the last 1 year that has built up the current cost of living crisis that we're living up until now. All right. And what that does is that when a high level of cost pressure has been mounted on the economy and economic agents have learned to live with those pressures, they've increased prices and all that, chances high that they may not necessarily reduce prices. All right. Again, because you do not have the necessary shock absorbers. Again, because you've also seen the language of the current administration that it is out to sort of gain more revenue and all that. So businesses will technically begin to hedge against possible increases in taxes and all that in the future. And by so doing, they will retain increased price positions with the potential to further increase prices, all right, if they need to. All right. So it doesn't necessarily help the poor breathe from the angle of the current social fabric of increased cost centers in the economy. All right. However, the attempt of the policy seeks to do so. So why we have this gap? Because we have a lot of wrongs have been done. All right. And to right those wrongs is going to take a lot of time and a lot of confidence. Social relief programs have to be introduced in the mainstream so as to be able to gain the confidence of supply side stakeholders or demand side stakeholders to let them know that, okay, there will be nothing within the next 1 year that would warrant increased prices. As such, let the hedging game stop, and let the what's the word now? Abnormal profit spree, stop and all of that. So a lot of, again, regulatory controls have to go into managing the gap between what government is trying to do with the policy and what institutions are trying to hedge against. I don't know if you get what I mean. So it's just a very complex trade-off to deal. However, it's just what it is.
Okay, so Gospel, in as much as you were saying that the turnaround time for these policies to manifest and yield positive results might be slow and probably might not have that much impact on the people, I'd like to find out, does that mean that there is actually none in all of these recent policies, these tax policies, that you would say stands out for you, that you feel, okay, probably this might just be some bit of cushioning that might come to the citizens or probably to business? Anyone at all that stands out for you?
Yeah, I mean, there are already loads and loads of existing narratives when it comes to taxation in Nigeria that impacts heavily on the current state of play. So whether you're trying to rewrite an executive order or, sort of revert that order, whatever the case may be, it technically does not solve the fundamental core of issues when it comes to fiscal engagement and taxation in Nigeria. Let's not forget that in as much as, and that's not to say that the vibe and the approach around this is not good. It makes sense. It's a good thing to do. But the overall fabric of this argument is largely around people are not inspired, when it comes to complying, to pay taxes and all that. People are not encouraged to comply. There is no accountability or transfer. We all know what the issues are, multiple taxes and all that. Until we begin to deal with all these elements, which have already created the strong leakages and the increased cost centers in the first place, or part of it, we may not be able to really find a sustainable relief. I didn't forget. So gone are the days where a one-stop policy or a one policy action would bring the relief we want. We need to understand that we're dealing with piles and piles and piles of problems that exist at not just a root causal level, but have grown across the value chain of delivering public experience or social experience for for the average Nigerian. So how do we deal across the other fundamental issues whilst we're trying to create relief programs? That's the big ticket fundamental question. Again, in the face of serious, genuine needs to mobilize more revenue and to scale investment in the economy.
All right, now talking about the reversals now, would you say that they're actually in line with the national tax policy? And what does that even say about the former administration's revenue generation drive and economy managers? Because, of course, we know that the previous administration, before it rounded up its term, actually came up with the ratification of these policies hastily, and now we're seeing some sort of reversal. What does that mean to you?
I mean, it just tells us that the way Nigeria is right now, the complex set of things, you cannot do anything hastily, and safe to say also the new president, Bola Tinubu, I mean, in recent weeks, whilst he's been in office, he's tried to sort of address the strategic, and when I use the word try to address them, it, has been more of rolling out executive orders, and what those things do is that it creates perception of investors' confidence in the economy, which also is a very good thing to have and very necessary, nice to have as well, because it would get, positioning investors to start looking into the economy and start paying attention, such as the unification of the exchange rate and all that. Now, do those policies have severe downsides? Yes, they do. Were they properly thought out? In many cases, maybe not. However, because the world we live in right now there's a growing diverse attention of things, meaning that several policies tend to strengthen the investors, investment, and financial market at the risk of the real sector. And you actually need the real sector to power growth, although you also need the financial sector and investment sector to sort of provide the financing to unlock growth as well. So it's a very complex trade-off. So a block of all the policies that have been rolled out recently has been geared towards inspiring and trying to gain back that confidence, and which the current administration is seemingly, trying to fix that already. However, they have the downsides, all right? So how do you now begin to review and engage, interact with these policies in such a way that whilst you're trying to achieve the big ticket issues of confidence and investment, you're not hurting real sector stakeholders, consumers, SMEs who are trying to do business and all that? Because at the end of the day, if you do not manage that curve well, it will further feed into both inflation and the cost of living crisis. And the reason why those two are pretty much looking different now is that inflationary dynamics has eaten deeply into the fundamental basic necessity, living structure of the average Nigerian and businesses. All right, so the narrative is evolving. It's a question of how do you pace these policies and manage the downside effect of them while you're trying to build confidence.
All right, now that you've mentioned inflation, other aspect that has to do with the financial sector, even have to do with policies that would do with other sectors of the economy and the likes. Now, are there other areas within the Financial Act, of course, that has been deferred anyway by the government? Are there other areas of that particular Financial Act that you feel the government has not really addressed and should address?
Well, for now, I do not think so, because again, the reason why I feel it's a great conversation is that the government is barely 3 months into office to properly address conversations within the Finance Act. Let's not forget that all of these paperwork and all that was put together by the last administration. Again, you want to ask yourself, how relevant are these line items within the vision of the current president? Again, in context to the cluster of ministers, the prospective new ministers that will be resuming office soon, yet to announce them and yet to resume. So by the time you look at it generally and you ask yourself, what's the vision of the national economic team? All right, then there is a very likelihood that these items may be reviewed. If they are not reviewed, the mode of execution and the process to executing them may be reviewed. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. The institutional flow and how we seek to drive results using the Finance Act 2023 may change completely. So it's a very dicey place to be, but it's safe to say within the first 3 months that we are in a lot of developing stage within this administration. It's still very early, but we expect that a lot more work needs to be done around announcing who your ministers are. Let them get into work quickly. Let's know what the big ticket issues are, and let's know what we're dealing with soon enough.
All right, let's take a look quickly at the suspension of the green tax on single-use plastics. Some have said that the status quo should remain as it was meant to actually reduce environmental pollution. So looking at the suspension or the reduction in the green tax, which would you actually subscribe for?
Well, it's a bit tricky because in the first place, we're very used to trying to use how would I put it now? So, for instance, you send a child to school to study, and you tell the child when you if you come first, I'm going to buy you X, Y, Z. You know, if you don't do this, I'm going to do this to you. You know, there are always threats attached when you don't want people to do things, and it's a cultural thing. All right, so. And over time, we've seen that has not worked in the Nigerian sector. All right. So if the target, and a lot of times it bothers everybody of we're not asking the right question. So safe to say you're asking question of how do we eliminate or reduce poverty? You know, that's the wrong question to ask. The right question should be how do you unlock prosperity? How do you encourage a prosperity? How do you grow prosperity within the land? So the question is, how do we fizzle out or discourage use of single plastics in Nigeria? You know, what critical incentives can we introduce to enable or to encourage stakeholders to reduce use of, you know, single-use plastic and all that? So that's actually the question we need to ask. However, the body language was introducing a tax to discourage it. All right. So if you look at that behavioral psychology bit of that policy, it doesn't necessarily help us achieve it. That's why you got a lot of fight back and all that and all that. So, however, it's been partially recalled now, but I can tell you for free that it's going to be reviewed. So if the ultimate goal is to encourage more sustainability and the green economy argument and all that, then there has to be strategic incentive policy approach.
But the gospel, sorry to cut in.
By virtue of that policy.
Yeah, sorry to cut in, but don't you think that is like killing two birds with one stone? Because, of course, it would bring about some sort of revenue generation for the government. And when these companies see that they have to pay this certain amount of money in tax, coupled with other taxes that they pay, they probably might want to reduce on the use of the single plastic, don't you think?
So again, what it means is for the company and a slightly increase in cost of production and a slightly increase in the already multiple taxation challenges they deal with on many grounds. All right, and you're coming up like you're trying to tax on every which is not bad. I mean, which is not bad in my opinion. I just think it's a reactive policy approach. And you know the funny thing, if you go through the incentive route, you may actually inspire more compliance, but within the construct of that incentive route, you will make way more money than you would have using the tax route. So that you're using incentive does not necessarily mean you're not going to make money. It just depends on how the incentive is being structured, the language and how that incentive is being executed. You can even make more money. So it's technically trying to say that, can you make more money encouraging people to do things that are right? Or would you make more money using the cane and carrot approach, or what's that argument again? You know, trying to get people to do what is right. so that's the argument we are facing here.
Okay, so if I could infer, does it now mean that looking at this new trajectory in tax laws and provisions put out by this current administration, it will not end multiple taxation, it will not curb the hike in cost of production and probably services rendered, and also it probably might not even inhibit, local and foreign businesses rather than grant them the recourse to expand their business. Is that what you mean?
Say again, I didn't get the flow, sir.
All right, so I said I'm looking at this new trajectory on these tax laws and, of course, the provisions. Based on what you've said, does it now mean that these tax laws will not in any way curb the hike in cost of production, and it probably might not even put an end to multiple taxation, because you've also mentioned it a couple of seconds back? And do you think it would inhibit rather than grant recourse to these local and foreign businesses to expand their businesses and operations?
That you mean the reversal of some of these policies?
Yes.
Yeah. So the reversal of some of these policies are a confidence building gain in the government of the day. They do not address the multiple taxation argument. They do not address the compliance to pay tax, you know, people being inspired and encouraged to pay tax. They do not address the accountability issues of even waste of government or poor use of taxpayers' money. They do not address those issues, right? So the big ticket for me will be ensuring there's a strategic approach to fix the leakages within the tax system and to encourage more tax payments or payers to get into the net. You know, how do you expand the tax net than the tax base, you know, as the case may be? That's the big ticket question. Now, once that is dealt with, any withdrawal of policies that you think may be unhealthy at a particular point in time in the economy will be seen from a genuine standpoint are seeking to support businesses. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. So businesses, tax or not, businesses are already dealing with the fact that tomatoes is expensive. Let's assume food businesses. Businesses are already dealing with the fact that a subsidy. Subsidy argument is there. The cost of fuel and diesel and all that is hiked. Businesses are already dealing with high cost of logistics and all that. So that already frames into the cost per unit of a product that goes into the hand of the average consumer, meaning consumers get to pay more to feed, to transport, and to have a life living in Nigeria, than their counterparts everywhere in the world on a month-on-month. So the argument for doing business and increased cost of business is not just taxation. Taxation is one of the components. However, within the construct of taxation, there's need to deal with the root causal dynamics or the root causal issues first. Then, as we roll out some of these relief programs, it will be seen as a layer on, in terms of social investment or social relief, and consumers or stakeholders can really perceive the government correctly and engage.
Finally, Gospel.
Also to add that taxation or revenue agencies need to come off like they're seeking to support businesses, not seeking to extract from them. It starts from there.
All right, just to wrap it up, how do you expect the government to increase its tax net when it seems as though the database for this tax or tax administration in the country does not have a robust quality and up-to-date database of the people that are meant to pay taxes and businesses that are meant to pay taxes? Because there have always been conversation around how many people are actually paying taxes, how many people are meant to pay taxes that are not paying taxes, how many people are evading taxes, how many officials are actually aiding and abetting and helping these businesses not to pay taxes. We don't have these indices, we don't have these facts or this information. How do we now expand the tax nets?
Yeah, I think it has to be on both ends. On the government end, government has those resources to do a comprehensive review of the tax system of businesses in Nigeria. How many businesses do you have? What's the accurate figure? We don't even have the accurate figure. So, and how do you do them by region, subnationally, and all that? So there has to be a comprehensive review. With the banks and all that, you can literally use BVN numbers to trace these things and all that. And there has to be some form of tax intelligence. When you engage data and engage intelligence side of things, you can easily trace these things and then have the legal framework to sort of support first than punish. You understand what I'm trying to say? So support first, encourage than to punish. And then on the other side of things, presenting yourself as a more accountable government, openly seeking to cut down waste as much as you can, and building that public communication with the people. Once you can gain a level of trust with people and a level of accountability in the system, and people can trust you, that's the first step to inspiring compliance. So, all right, so once compliance is being inspired, then you deal across the bottlenecks of remitting taxes, all right? We should be able to do everything on a one-stop shop. It shouldn't be difficult. People should be able to file their taxes themselves without having to call a tax consultant. So, tax consultants are nice, but how do we close the bottlenecks so that it's a lot easier to scale that compliance, all right? So there are different layers from review to legal framework to accountability issues to scaling compliance and all that. And then also grow some form of consumer education around these elements. You cannot seem to grow and achieve consumer education when you are not also striving to be accountable. It doesn't work anywhere in the world. So accountability is relative though, but then there's a measure of trust that you can use to inspire compliance.
Okay, thank you so much, Gospel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.